A Superior Court judge in D.C. has awarded a man $9.2 million after he was exonerated due to a crime that he did not commit. This story involves a man by the name of Kirk Odom, and he spent 22 years behind bars for robbery and allegedly raping a woman. Now, again, he was convicted of a crime he did not commit. DNA evidence actually exonerated him, but unfortunately, he had already served his sentence before he was exonerated. He maintained that he was innocent. He would not confess to the crime because he didn't actually commit the crime. And unfortunately, he was arrested and charged when he was 18 years old. So some of his more formative years were spent behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. Now, as if the story couldn't get any worse, you read into the details of what he endured when he was behind bars, and he had to deal with prison rapes, diagnosis of HIV, suicide attempts, depression, and family estrangement. He said, "They can't pay me enough money to give me back the years that I've lost." Now, there have been a number of exonerations that we've covered on the Young Turks as of late due to the Innocence Project basically pushing for DNA evidence and DNA testing to prove that these individuals are innocent. According to the Washington Post, Odom is one of 5 D.C. men convicted of rape or murder whose charges have been vacated since 2009 because they were based on erroneous forensics and testimony by an elite unit of FBI hair experts.
So, a couple of things here. Number one, I can't fathom why we allow our prisons to be rape chambers. That it's just acceptable that, oh, if you go to prison for a minor drug offense, you know, smoking weed, dealing weed at a tiny level. I mean, look, I had a guy on the football team when I was in high school that used to deal weed, right? I didn't buy it, I didn't do that at the time, etc. You know, imagine if we put him in prison and then he started getting raped and then got HIV. What kind of an insane world do we live in, right?
It's this eye for an eye mentality that we have in the country. Okay, so he was wrongfully convicted, but convicted nonetheless of rape. So people would make the argument that, hey, you know, he raped, so that's what someone deserves. If they're going to go around raping people, then they should be raped behind bars. I mean, they don't.
Well, then let's pass a law. Let's pass a law saying if you commit even the most minor infraction where you wind up in jail or prison, we're going to, part of your punishment is going to be rape. And we're going to let random prisoners rape you every once in a while. Because that's, in fact, what's happening.
That is what's happening.
And, in fact, rape in jail is so large that, according to one article we read and covered on the show, more men are raped in the country than women because of all the prison rape. Okay, now, this guy, they robbed him of 22 years of his life. His family, he lost huge chunks of his family because they thought he did it.
They thought that he raped a woman.
And of course, he lost any chance of having a profession, obviously, right? Brutalized and terrorized in prison for 22 long years. And some are arguing he got too much money.
Yeah, so there are officials in the District of Columbia that are saying, look, all right, you know, he was wrongfully convicted. This is absolutely disastrous. But does he really deserve $9.2 million? I mean, when you really think about it, the federal government had some say in this case. So as a result, the federal government should be responsible. And there is a cap to how much money someone who is wrongfully convicted can receive from the federal government. Congress actually passed a law about this, and it's a little over $1 million. So they're saying, give him $1 million, and that's it. This guy spent 22 years of his life behind bars. He got repeatedly raped. He contracted HIV as a result of those prison rapes. And you're going to have a discussion about whether or not he deserves enough money? Get out of here. Like that, I mean, this story enrages me in so many different ways, right? Not only did you rob this man of a normal life, you're now adding insult to injury by having a stupid discussion as to who should be responsible for this. D.C. lawyers and prosecutors were behind this. It wasn't just the federal government. So D.C. should definitely pay. And considering how much he went through, $9.2 million, in my opinion, is nothing. By the way, the judge did break down why this decision was made, okay? About $1,000 per day of Odom's incarceration, $250 per day of his time spent on parole, because he also had to deal with parole afterwards, right? $200 per day between his exoneration and trial.
So I'm going to break down the numbers for you in just 1 second. Understand they want to kick it over to the federal jurisdiction, not just because they want to get it off their plate in D.C., but to make sure that his number is capped at 1.1 million, as Anna alluded to. So they want to make sure the guy gets $8 million less.
Yes.
Okay. That'll show him. That'll show him for being innocent for 22 years. Okay. Now, when you do the math behind the 1.1 million, you know what it comes out to? $50,000 a year for every year he was in prison.
It's amazing.
I mean, you could get that's just the money he could have made on just a regular job, right? If he was allowed to be a free person as he was supposed to be, he could have made $50,000 a year. I don't know what he would have made. You don't know what he would have. But it's not like they're saying $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, $1 million a year, just $50,000 a year. That's all 1.1 million is. That doesn't take into account any of the stuff that he went through, right? And that's what they'd like to cap it at. You rob me of 22 years and say, here, in return, I'll give you probably the bare minimum you would have made anyway. Oh, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Wow, aren't you generous, right? And 9.2 million, as Anna told you, is the breakdown of the $1,000. Who would take the $1,000 a day? You know, sometimes we have these conversations, usually in lighter settings. But would you? I mean, there's no way I would take $1,000 a day to be raped in prison repeatedly until I got HIV. Would anyone in their right mind take that? No one would, right? So don't begrudge him a dime of it, you animals. Okay, go ahead.
This may go a little bit even further. I hate to be the one to, because I think this is what leads to people to think, oh, he got the 9.2, this is great. You know, all is well. I mean, I think that's the first thing in people's minds. People who didn't have to put up with what he put up with. There's a great chance this guy is not going to survive. Fuck the $9.2 million. As we already had the quote saying, there's not an amount of money they can pay me that's going to make up for my life. So in this happening, it kind of throws us off of the point of this needs to change. The wrongful convictions and, as you said, the prison rape culture. Because now the tens and probably hundreds of thousands of other people that have been wrongfully convicted, raped, murdered, contracted HIV or any other disease because of this type of culture, they don't get exonerated. And when they get exonerated, it's because they're already dead or they never do and they never get any payments. So this little $9.2 million is enough to cover for all these people that have been wrongfully accused, convicted, and killed in our system. There's nothing you can do about it, but it's going to make us shut up about it. Because they're like, oh man, this one guy got 9.2. Oh, then I heard about this other case 6 months ago where this other guy got 6.2 million. It's okay. It's hush money, and I'm tired of it. It's not enough. This shit has to change, man.
Yeah.
They say that his conviction, of course, fed feelings of, and what he suffered in prison, feelings of shame, stigma, distrust, similar to what prisoners of war go through, right? And in a lot of ways, he was tortured like a prisoner of war, worse than a prisoner of war. They don't usually rape the prisoners of war. Well, we did in some instances with the forced feedings through the anus, etc. But normally you wouldn't. This is in some ways worse. And JR is right. Look, so often people don't care if they got the right guy. That's what really bothers me the most, right? In the old days, I talked about this in the history of lynchings we had in this country. They didn't care if they got the right guy. Oftentimes, of course, they knew it wasn't the right guy. They knew there was the white guy down the street who had done some crime. They didn't care. They just wanted vengeance, and they wanted to show people keep them in their place, right?
Absolutely.
So that was one of the purposes of just put them in jail. Who cares, right? And the second is some prosecutor and et cetera, and cops, they got a job. They don't want to do their job. They're lazy. They're like, okay, we got a black guy here. It's good enough. It's DC. Yeah, they would do fake forensic testing of his hair. Turns out all that was nonsense. Like they didn't know it was nonsense. They knew it was nonsense. We should go find those guys and put them in jail for 22 years.
Now, when you consider all the different people that are currently on death row who could have been convicted wrongfully, right? How can you be in favor of the death penalty? That's the part of the story that always gets to me. When you consider that the majority of Americans, it's not the vast majority, but it's still the majority of Americans, are still in favor of the death penalty. Look at the number of people who have been exonerated for crimes that they didn't commit. Let me give you some examples, okay? If you add up all the time these men and women have served for crimes they did not commit, that number would equal 5,192 years. 325 people have been exonerated since 1989.
Anna's right. How could you be in favor of it? I mean, are you so barbaric you want to kill innocent people? Look, I was in favor of the death penalty before, so I know it's not like I'm a softy, pansy liberal or whatever right-wingers think of people who are opposed to the death penalty. I've got a lot of feelings of vengeance in my heart. It's not the right way to go. It's not the Christian thing to do. Luckily, I'm not a Christian, so I don't have to worry about that, okay? But I don't want to kill the wrong people. What kind of person is willing to countenance killing all of those innocent people? You got to ask yourself that question.